Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. All right, Fangs and Infernos. The one thing that's always incredibly important to remember is all of us at one point were small. And being small means that things needed to keep our attention. We love to run around, bite necks, light things on fire, do little mischievous things because we were all little devils and little vamps and little misfits and all that kind of stuff growing up. But one thing that all of us collectively is at some point or another, we liked toys, had toys, played with toys. Now, what did those toys do? What did they cause? Who knows there, Devil? I guess we're going to have to find out. But we're going to pit some toys up against each other as we talk about Puppet Masters versus demonic toys. Oh, that being said, Fangs and Infernos, we are not talking about this movie. This is an actual movie. As all of you guys know, Devil and I are big Full Moon fans. We are fans of Charles Band. We have met him. We love him. We have met Richard Band. They are lovely, lovely people. But for the sake of this showdown, being that we are talking about the first Puppet Master versus the first Demonic Toys, it was easier to put this on screen as we talk about Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. What do you say there, Devil, my friend?
Yeah, we're gonna we're bringing back a oldie but goodie. We've done a couple full moon verses before, and it's like, why not, it's getting close to that holiday season, and it's time to give the little Rugrats some toys. And little Johnny's been a pain in the ass, son of a bitch. Give him a little, maybe, a little blade toy, or maybe a pinhead, or you can give him, the leech woman. Or, if little Susie's being a little bitch and you're tired of her whining and you don't want to buy her, the easy bake oven, you can get her an oopsie doll.
Absolutely, because we've got oopsie dolls, or we can give them the Jack Attack. We can do all that kind of stuff. But absolutely, my friend, we're gonna have a little bit of fun with some full moon features, man. It's definitely a good one. When it comes to like demonic toys, it's a Peter Manoogian directed movie. This is the one that I went with. You're very partial to Puppet Master, you're very partial to Blade. And I love, we're just full moon people. Puppet Master is amazing, as is Demonic Toys. I love Demonic Toys. Always been a really big fan of that. Mrs. Vamp is fond of that movie as well. She definitely remembers watching, one of the Demonic Toys at one point, and with, Jack, just biting off a dude's like face, like full on, where like, Mama Vamp is like, no, you're not allowed to watch that, and Mrs. Vamp is like, watch me. But no, Demonic Toys is so much fun. It's got that really, like, it's got this really kind of like unique but kind of bizarre like opening where you've got just that awkward conversation of like lovers having a conversation about like, well, we would love to start a family one of these days, and the wife, the girlfriend is like, yeah, we need to talk about kids, and we need to, you know, consider like having a family and doing this and doing that. And he's like, I mean, if there's time, like I'm down for the cause, but whatever. Yeah, I guess maybe perhaps. And then she's like, drops the hint that he picks up on, is like, wait, are you pregnant? And she's like, yeah. And then all of a sudden that switch is flipped. And he's like, oh my God, absolutely. This is great. I'm so happy. And then all of a sudden disaster strikes.
Yeah, I mean that's there's like a couple precursors when it comes to this movie. You know, we love our camp. This movie is full on camp. This movie is probably I mean, it's kind of hard to say just because the fact that these full moon movies we love, but it may be one of the worst acting movies I've seen as far as a full moon
Yeah.
when it comes to some of the characters, like you know what I mean. You're just like, oh god, like these guys are horrible. Like I said, later on you get a little bit better. You know,
Yeah.
you get the girl that's hiding in the air ducts and stuff like that. You get her, and then the main guy, the pizza dude, is people would remember him from Sometimes They Come Back. You know, he was in that movie, so you know, like he's not too bad. But yeah, it's a little bit, and that's the thing about I like about you know demonic toys and you know what Puppet Master. Like you said, Puppet Master's always been my number one. But you know, and I've always liked all the Puppet Masters. But the one thing that I do enjoy you know the demonic toys versus the is that like Chucky kind of feel to it where you know you know the demonic toys are pretty you know where it comes to that they're like that Freddy they're like that Chucky because they talk they joke make jokes they swear you know they go you know they do that where you know the Puppet Masters they're you know pretty much none of them talk you know they just kind of mumble and grumble and do stuff and they're pretty straightforward there's not really I mean later on in the series they start getting some characters that kind of are a little
Yep.
bit more campy but like in the original Puppet Master they're just more straightforward I'm gonna kill you and demise you where you know you've got you know in demonic toys you know you've got the oopsie daisy it's like you miss me it's like oh shit you know what I mean like oh fuck that hurt you know what I mean just crazy shit and then you got the teddy bear that just rolls and then you got the Jack in the Box that just like I don't know, it's like some weird worm thingy that comes out of his thing or whatever. I just love that. And then you just like, you know, adding all that campiness, you got the which is funny about this movie is like, you know, while the security guard is like hiding, you know, this big huge toy house, he's, you know, securing this toy house, you know, lo and behold, he's you know, drinking on the job, he hates cockroaches and he's watching TV and he's watching Puppet Masters on TV, so it's
Right.
yeah, it's even funnier. But yeah, it's like, you know,
It's
you
like
have that.
Halloween 3 when Michael shows up on the TV.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, and then you know, you have like this weird thing that you can't really explain to begin with, but then later on it explains it with these little kids playing war. And you know, that was one thing I liked about this movie. Even though like obviously the kid was just, you know, lipping to this, you know, backtrack. But I always thought that little kid was really cool. I like that actor. I thought he did really well
I
with
agree.
portraying like this evil, you know, demonic guy. Even though obviously his voice isn't really wasn't his voice because it was, you know, in a demonic guy or whatever. But I always thought that I always there was like the one part of the movie that I've always remembered. I just remembered like the little kid with the you know the long fingernails and he's kind of playing around with them and stuff like that. And, you know, basic premise, you know, Hellraiser type style where you know it takes a guy to bleed on the floor of a toy store, you know, toy place. But I love the fact, you know, I'll let you kick into it because I know that you're a good guy. But I love the fact that they have a little backstory about the
Yes.
demonic kid too.
No, absolutely. And I'm a big fan of that. Like I love the idea of the backstory of, the actor's name, the actor's name is Daniel, and he doesn't have a big filmography and which is not uncommon for movies like this. Like, don't get me wrong, like there's a long history of established actors who have that B-rate horror movie. The first two that come to mind instantaneously for me is Jennifer Aniston with Leprechaun and George Clooney with Return of the Killer Tomatoes. So like that's just or and so that's just the way it is, or Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. But Daniel's got some fun stuff. Strangely enough, he's in Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox, and he's also in one of the Children of the Corn movies. But I really do like that idea of that just kind of creepy dubbed child, kind of like Vigo in Ghostbusters 2, it's not about, I mean, it's common knowledge that the actor who played Vigo spoke the lines and then got dubbed over and wasn't stoked about it. I'm not bringing that part up because it's, the same thing happened to Daniel. I'm sure he always knew that his voice was not going to be used. But it was a cool dynamic. It was the idea of this almost kind of, no pun intended, but kind of puppet master, kind of puppeteer character that these toys are like the henchmen of. And that's what I always liked about it. The one thing I do love about demonic toys over Puppet Master, we're going to get more into the overall breakdown, so I'm going to keep this kind of short, but like and it was just like you said, Devil, like the characters, the toys in demonic toys are very distinguished, and they're a little bit, I would say they're a little bit more of a top tier than the characters of Puppet Master. And I don't mean that in a bad way because Puppet Master is great and we're going to break it all down. But the fact that they went a Freddy Krueger direction in Demonic Toys, where the characters in Puppet Master are more of a Jason Voorhees style, also allows for those characters to really branch out. Because Demonic Toys, Puppet Master does as well, but especially with Demonic Toys, Demonic Toys is like the top of a tree that has a lot of different branches. There's multiple Baby Oopsie movies. There's movies including the Jack in the Box. They've got, Demonic Toys with one of the other Full Moon series known as Doll Man. Ultimately, like I said, they still did their own version of Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. But I will say the cast of characters is overall stronger, in my opinion, much stronger in Demonic Toys than it is in Puppet Master. However, that being said, it's easier to do that when you establish characters that have that wit, have that ability to show that they are just that characters, as opposed to Puppet Master, which are more just bloodthirsty henchmen, with the way that Leech Woman is, Pinhead, Six Shooter, Jester, Blade, so on and so forth. We'll get more into that later. But yes, I love the idea of the catalyst of the young boy. Ironically, with Daniel also being in a Children of the Corn, it reminds me so much of Isaac's character as kind of that young, creepy henchman who, again, is pulling all the strings. Dance, puppets, dance. And that was something I thought was really cool about this movie. And Devil, you're 100% right. The acting in this movie is definitely not what I would call elite. It's 100% what I would definitely call subpar. But strangely enough, as the movie plays out, it actually does get stronger in the presentation. Not, still not the best, but the good thing is, as you start off with this movie, I don't blame anybody who might have started watching this movie and felt they needed to bail out because it definitely pokes at that. But if you do give it, if you do give it a chance, if you tolerate it through that first 30 minutes so that the movie can really get its engines revved up and warmed up, I do feel it it evens out. It gets stronger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like when it comes, circling back to the characters and stuff like that. I mean, I think as far as demonic toys and the as far as puppet masters, I think and that I mean, I guess I would agree and disagree with the quality.
For sure.
I think it's because I think the characters of the demonic or the characters of Puppet Masters have always been better characters. I've loved like even throughout the series. I think that was better. I think what it is because the fact that demonic toys came out afterwards, since and they were kind of like what they probably heard some of the beefs about which we'll talk about when we go into Puppet Master. But
Yeah.
I can mention it now that you really only get a few. I think it's screen time for Puppet Master is like 5 minutes with the puppets. throughout the whole entire
Yeah,
movie, which is an hour and a half movie, but it's only got 5 minutes where it's more of the characters and more of that stuff, which we'll get into. Where Demonic Toys is definitely character driven, but once you get into or even the other Demonic Toys that came out afterwards, it's
yeah.
very it's very more like their centered characters
They are
where
the stars.
like you know, like I said with the first Puppet Master. Now, granted, yes, later on when you get through some of the other Puppet Masters, they do start to be a little bit more in the film. They're in the film a lot longer. There's times where, you start getting into Puppet Master 3 or 4, Axes of Evil and all that, which, it's predominantly all about the puppets and not, and not anybody else. But I think that's what it is. It's like that's the one thing, like I said, I love about Demonic Toys. I mean, other than the, like you said, the comedy side of it, is that you
Yeah.
get a little bit more of that, which I wish you would have gotten more of that. But like I said, that's probably something that Charles and those guys took the heart from some of the fans saying, "Oh, I love Puppet Master. You should, I just wish that we had more screen time of them." So when they decided to probably do other Puppet Masters, they're like, "Okay, we'll use that thing." And then, like I said, Demonic Toys came out, 4 or 5 years later or something after Puppet Master. They were like, hey, let's just take what we've got from that advice about being more screen time for that. Let's do that. But let's also, since these characters are not really puppets, they're demonic toys, they're dolls, let's add that Freddy Krueger kind of feel to it. So I like that. Plus, I love the fact that, I didn't realize this and I completely forgot about it the whole entire time. But I love the fact that this movie was originally going to be called Dangerous Toys.
Yeah.
And apparently they got like a cease and
They got a
desist.
cease and desist.
Yeah, like from the band saying like, no, we have that copyrighted. Cause like it makes then like I said it made sense. So I'm kind of curious of like when they probably made the movie if it was gonna have like a more of a demonic. I wonder if it was just gonna be these toys just kind of animated somehow and became dangerous. But since they couldn't do dangerous toys, they had to like think of another thing. So that's when they came up with that demonic kind of backstory with the kids and all that. And then that's when they made that little they're like, oh, we got to switch it up a little bit because even though the
Con
toys are still dangerous, now they're demonic.
Hey, cons that love vampire and devil, bring back Charles so we can talk to him about that.
Yeah,
Not that we can't contact him directly because we can and we have, but at the same time, that would be a fun, just casual conversation for us to have with Charles if a con brings him back for sure. So that
yeah. I mean, and like I said, I mean, and one of the other things that I do appreciate, over demonic toys sometimes too is it like with both movies, they're very short. They're
yes.
that hour and a half, they go right through it, through it pretty quick and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, I just love the fact that like, the like I said, the toys in this, man, they're just like, just so gestures freaking eating people's faces and the eyeballs and stuff like that. So it's just so much fun. Like I said, even the character where it's like, you got it, you got the cop and stuff like that with the bad acting, and all of a sudden he like handcuffs them, and then all of a sudden they start fighting and all the dumb stuff and stuff like that with that. It's just like it's so weird, and like I completely forgot about like I remember the kid, but I forgot about the concept of the other little boy later on that
Yeah.
you find out like it's kind of like
The
he.
soldier.
He's kind of like, yeah, he's kind of to me I always stuff felt like it's like the good side versus the evil side. So even though like maybe he's like the God version, and then the other little boy is the demonic version, and the devil version. But I always thought that was really cool. I love and who doesn't like a bunch of little brats with the on bike tricycles with gas masks pointing at you when you're trying to stay hidden.
Yeah. No, 100% for sure. And the other thing too with this movie, and I think you're right, Devil, is like because you had Puppet Master in the late 80s, you had Demonic Toys in the early 90s. And the other thing too about this movie is while concepts of them are very similar, which is one of the things I thought would make this particular showdown so much fun and also so interesting, is but you could also tell that with Demonic Toys. whether it was chosen, designed, or just went there naturally. Demonic Toys is definitely more of like the bloodlusty of this series as well. Puppet Master is genuinely cleaner when it comes to that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, you get it. There's red on you. You absolutely see it for sure. But again, you have certain kills, certain leeches, certain different things that they do with that. This is actually turning into a bit of a blend, but at the same time, it's so similar that it's kind of okay. Um, versus, you know, Demonic Toys has that, animalistic quality to it, especially with a character like, with like Jack, because, just this demonic Jack in the Box, sharp teeth, just rip and tear, just completely like that. And again, it's still got that trademark camp to it because when it comes to like the final showdown, you've got this somewhat, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of these kills, especially when I watch movies from companies or franchises that I care a lot about and really enjoy, like Trauma. You and I have met Uncle Lloyd on many occasions, just like Full Moon. We met Charles together, and same with Richard. And it's the idea of like having that same kind of like camp design, but almost surprisingly easy execution of the villain. And it's weird with certain things like that, but it makes sense. Just like you would told Lloyd from Trauma of him being our generation's Ed Wood. Charles isn't far off from something like that, while again, similar to Lloyd, but a little bit more so. And I don't know whether it's his style. Maybe Charles's background allows for a little bit more financial backing. Again, I don't know this to be fact or fiction or anything. There's always been a slightly more polished aspect to Full Moon over Trauma, but at the same time, they both have that same style of camp. But at the same time, it also does lead to that same type of style of why does it always seem like movies of this caliber have an unusually laughable, easy killing of the villain that you think you would want a little bit more proper showdown? And the end of this movie, I mean, I like it, it works, it makes me laugh, and I dig it. But it's still, it was like, oh, just another impaling that we've seen a million times, and it seems just that easy. I don't know, Devil. It's just kind of funny. Again, it works for the dynamic, it works for the criteria, it works for the style, but there's always still something about the consistent, easy slaying of what seems to be a dominant villain that always makes me laugh and at times kind of makes me want to cry.
Yeah, the little, like I said, the good little boy, the soldier, comes out, he shoots him. He turns, the boy turns into like the more of like the adult one, which is kind of weird. Which is one part of the movie I didn't quite understand was he was talking about basically, he wants this girl to be his mother and he's gonna do the soul, but she's already pregnant, but he was talking about doing the nasty with her, and I'm like,
Yes.
well, I'm like, well, why do you need to have sex with her? She's already impregnated. Like she's already. I'm like, so you need to somehow, have when you have sex with her. Apparently, you're gonna travel your body into her, womb and then go into the baby. I'm like, what? That don't make no sense. Like, it would make more sense if she wasn't pregnant yet and he was gonna impregnate her. And then I was like, so I was like, but yeah, but like you said, yeah, all of a sudden the little boy shoots, and then all of a sudden it's like a bayonet to the gut or something like that, and I'm done. You know what I mean? Even in like, at least in the beginning, when they had the backstory of why it took him 66 years was because he was a little baby and they threw him and like and threw him and
I know.
it's
It's like,
kind of
can we give a little appreciation to the idea of trick-or-treaters like midget tossing a baby?
yeah, it's like I love it. It's like I just love the fact that like they go to this house trick or treat. Oh, we got something better for you, and then and here's a here they don't really see what it is, but she's like, you got this thing. It's like a seed, and you got to plant it, and it's gonna grow, and they're like, thank you, and be so like nice. They're gonna be like, what the fuck is this old lady giving us, man? This isn't candy. And then obviously when they see it, the reaction of what the demonic baby, little dead baby thingy, I'd be like, ah! I would have thrown that shit too. But
Totally.
I'm like, who? Like, what? Those are like the most polite trick or treaters in the entire world. Like they're the kids that are going around un-TPing people's houses and like cleaning people's eggs off of people's cars instead of doing it. I'm like, this is the nicest trick or treaters in the world. Like, oh, thanks, lady. It's like, when some trick or treater lady gives you like a book or like crowns or like freaking vegetables or something. You're like, well,
Giving you
fuck
a
you, lady.
toothbrush.
You throw it at them. Like, they're like, oh, thank you. Like, yeah, I'm like, they were just like way too polite. Like, obviously, like I said, and then they see what it is. But
Yeah. That trick-or-treater house you go to, devil, that gives you a toothbrush.
yeah, like, don't eat any sweets. Here's a toothbrush. I'm like, yeah, I know where you can stick that toothbrush, lady.
100%, man, for sure, brother. Absolutely. But it is what it is. It's fun. It's campy. We love it. It's got its bloodlust. It's got its unique comedy. It's got its dirty comedy, and it's an all-around good time. When it comes to the obituaries, it's simple enough for me when it comes to this movie. Honestly, like, look, when it comes to Full Moon, just like Trauma, I love this company. These movies are 10 out of 10s in my heart. Like, you know, Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, Ginger Dead Man, of course, Subspecies, and Killjoy. As far as what Charles does, they're 10 out of 10s in my heart. Now, let's let's get into reality. When you take the acting into consideration and stuff like that. Like, look, I do like this movie. It's an enjoyable time. I think it's fun when it comes to the movies that not only spawned off of it, but the fact that, yes, there's Demonic Toys, there's Demonic Toys 2, there's Demonic Toys versus Puppet Master, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, overall, it takes a lot of shots because of the bad acting, but then I do think it builds up to a stronger product. I really think that if you give it a good enjoyment, while the movie is solidly a 5.5, I would give it. There is a small part of me that does want to give it a solid 6, just as a cap off, because I like the development of the characters, the story's fun, and at least it understands that the weaknesses of its cast does get stronger with the implications and like the building of those demonic toys characters, where with Puppet Master, of course, being centered around those same characters, there's strength in demonic toys with the fact that these characters have real personalities, whether it be sly wit, savage brutality, or just like a unique way of just creeping you the fuck out. So I'm gonna give it a 6.0, Devil. I enjoy it. I feel that's a fun, solid place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. Like you said, it's one of those ones like, yeah, I would love to give it a higher grade, but in reality, you know what I mean? It's just
Ends across
certain,
the board.
there's certain, if we give, Demonic Toys a 10.0, then Near Dark and Lost Boys and them is like 100.0 then.
Yes,
You know what I mean? So it's like
totally.
we can't go that crazy with the cheese whiz
No.
when it comes to that, but
But again, and again, I've always been on my soapbox for this. I fucking love full moon movies. They bring me
yeah.
so much joy.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you with the 6.0. I think 6.0 is more of a fair thing. Like I said, it's not perfect, but the movie's not perfect. And like I said, there's better full moon movies, and there are definitely a lot worse full moon movies than Demonic Toys. So it's
Totally.
6.0 is a good middle ground for where where it lies in the full moon catalog.
Yeah.
It's definitely considered, even though like nowadays, I mean, you got a consideration that it is an older film too versus
Oh,
like the newer ones now. But there's just so much stuff out there. I mean, like I said, it's whatever floats your boat and stuff like that. That's what I love about those. It's like, some people will be like, "Oh, I hate demonic toys, but I love Evil Bong," and then you look at like, really, Evil Bong is your favorite out of all the movies? Like, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, even like Dollman, I was a fan of Dollman. Dollman is not the greatest series either. It's like I said, none of the full moons. Like I said, to me, like I said, when it comes down to it, and even when we talk about it, like Puppet Master's always been my one. That's even though I'm a huge fan of Subspecies 2, I've always
oh,
loved that series. Puppet Master's always been my number one love. That was like my first real big into the full moon. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think for Demonic Toys 6.0, like that, that little above the middle is perfect.
absolutely, brother. No, for sure, man. And it's the same, Puppet Master is that's yours. Subspecies, that's mine. But this showdown, of course, it was always going to be apropos. But I also do want to throw this in since this is a full moon showdown. Have you ever felt that there was a little like kind of like where you kind of want to pull down watch out for the sun, but pull down the glasses for a split second and be like, wait, you've got this Demonic Toys series. You've got this Puppet Master series. Charles, was Blood Dolls really necessary, bro?
Yeah.
Did you really need a random one-off, bizarro, awkward copy like of that? So I just wanted to throw that. And Charles, if you're watching, that is not a knock, dude. We fucking love your company, dude, really. But also, this is what we do, and we love movies and we love stuff like this. But again, Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, solid, multiple in some cases sequels. Blood Dolls, really, bro? I mean, it's cool, it's unique, and I love the movie. Again, brings me a lot of joy, but very, very bizarre. But that's for a whole nother potential showdown, a whole nother conversation if we ever decide to tackle Full Moon as a full-on breakdown. God damn, Devil, that might be an 18-part episode if we ever try to do something like that. But anyway, let's kick it over to you, man. Let's talk a little bit about Puppet Master, my friend. We've got Blade, we've got Leech Woman, we've got Jester, we've got Six Shooter. Man, Pinhead, it's a unique one, bro, with some pretty cool characters. Oh my God, Blade!
Uh,
Oh,
I am the
it's a
Blade. Not
twofer.
I am not the Blade from the first movie, but I am a Blade from a future movie. Anyway, like I said, I've always been a huge Puppet Master fan. I've always loved that. I've got Blade. Blade has always been my favorite character. I've got Blade tattooed on me. So I've always been keen to this series, and I love it. Like I said in the precursor when it came to Demonic Toys, my only gripe about this movie, which like I said, is that I wish we would have had more time with these dolls. That's the one thing. But that's the thing that they, subsequently when it comes start getting to the second movies and the third movies and stuff like that, we start getting a little bit more in depth. But that's the one thing. But like I said, I love it. I mean, it's just a cool story. I mean, first of all, I mean, you got freaking William Hickey. I love that guy playing Toulon. I mean, that's the greatest guy ever. He's like, rubbing the doll. He's like, my life for your life. Just bringing it in. You got the Nazis coming in trying to get him. He takes himself off. Then precursors into these group of people who are friends that kind of have like mental capabilities, like psychic capabilities and different things that are able to do that. They're trying to find the secret of these dolls and this Toulon guy and this magic stuff like that, and eventually one of their friends does and brings them into this hotel in the middle of nowhere. You find out the guy is dead, or is he? So we do a little test. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this, like I said, when it comes to demonic toys in this, I mean, I'm not gonna say that the acting in this is 100% pure. I think it's a little bit better. I like these guys a little bit better. I think the characters and the way they portray stuff and stuff like that. So it's not as bad or as campy. This definitely gets kind of bad. I love the two like more sexual like
Yeah.
mediums where like she like touches something like, oh, someone had sex on this bed, like, oh, this guy was raping this girl in the elevator, or this person did this, and it's like, or even like in the very beginning when you're learning about these characters, you get him like, this girl's locked up and he's like, man, she's got some weird thoughts in her head, like this girl's dirty, and she's like, nah, no, not getting any of this. You just like, you kind of seem like these guys are like the sleazier version of Bill Murray's character in Ghostbusters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where he's just trying to use that psychic ability kind of stuff to get laid, and these guys are taking it to a more extreme. But I mean, I do love it. Like I said, you got the white witch that they call her, the medium that's doing these tarots. Shout out to the very beginning of the movie because the girl that they were she's telling about is Barbara Crampton, which is just kind of funny that you just have her literally, her pedigree in films, and then she's literally like a 5-second person in this movie. Same thing with William Hickey playing, playing Toulon. You know what I mean? I've always loved him. I love him in Creep Show with the cat, and
Yep.
or Tales from the Crypt episodes he's been on and stuff like that. I've always loved his character. I mean, who doesn't love, Grace? You want you to say Grace, from National Lampoon's, Christmas Vacation. So like, who doesn't love, doesn't love him and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I just love the fact that you got all these toy these puppets and stuff like that you do it. I love the fact that it's all basically puppeteered and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So it's like, even with the character like Blade, there were 5 people working on him at the same
That's
time,
insane.
and it's so cool. I mean, not only, like I said, not only do I not like this character, I mean, he's small, he's badass, he's got the hook on one side, the blade on one side, but I love whenever he like gets excited and looks, he's got the little like freaking screws that come out of his eyeballs that kind of glow and stuff like that. I always thought that was really cool. I mean, I've always liked Pinhead. He's kind of your muscle man and stuff like that. You got Leech Woman. I love her. I don't really get the where the hell is she just coming up with these leeches out of nowhere.
I,
I don't
dude,
really
I've
get the. I
never
never
known that
really got
devil
the
either.
story of her character as far as like. I mean, in the one sense, I get it. In the scene where you get her normally, or you get her big scene, it makes sense. This guy's tied up. You really can't do very much. So her being like that, other than someone being tied up or knocked out or unconscious, Leech Woman is almost completely pointless. Now you got some of the other ones, like you got Jester, which is kind of just, he's just there. I guess he's sort of like just a mastermind. And then you get Tunnel, which he's probably between. I mean, like I said, Pinhead is just because he's strong. He's got that muscle. I mean, the two deadliest ones, at least in this early series, is definitely Blade, because he can cut the shit out of you. And then you got Tunnel, which he's just drilling holes in people's head throughout the whole entire movie,
Dude,
which I
he
was just.
brutalized that one bitch, dude.
Yeah, I just love that and stuff like that. But then, like you said, even in the very beginning, you have, when these Nazis are coming, you have like you kind of have like a Mongolian kind of character and another one that are in the box, but you never see them. They don't come alive. So I'm kind of always curious about those characters. And like you said, later on, you get other ones, with that. But that's why I always liked with Blade, like when it came to especially those early ones and stuff like that. I just loved his outfit, the trench coat and the hat and just like the coolness with him. And he's just like the one that, throughout the beginning of the movie is just like exploring, he's running around, he's trying to get back in. And that's the other thing I want to do before I give it back to you and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
man.
which is funny about this movie. So you got him running throughout this whole entire hotel in the very beginning. He's even jumping on piano. Ding, 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 bang, 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 bang. No one notices them until the one fat lady all of a sudden notices her all of a sudden. Ah! And then even like later on in the movie when the guy's like, getting out of his hotel and, out of his room and stuff like that, and the puppet comes out and moves around him. like do not people not look down ever? Like, I mean, I understand that these are like small puppets, but still, I'm always like, I'm coming out of my room, I'm always looking like near my feet or something like that. Not that I'm looking for anything, but I'm like, how do you not notice this little movie, these little dudes? But I always thought that was funny. I love the very beginning with like of him just running through this hotel the whole time. I mean, he's literally like, a couple inches tall, and he beats those Nazis upstairs before they can even get to him. And these guys are super tall. Like, I don't know how he got in the elevator way before any of them. And it's like, I'm like, for a little dude, man, he's trucking it along.
Dude, it's so hilarious, Devil, because like there's so much of like this movie that like makes me just laugh out loud. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Pinhead is like trying to kill the girl, and she's like her legs all like, like cut or broken or whatever because he like breaks her ankle or whatever. But like she just keeps tossing him like literally like a child with their doll throwing like a tantrum. She picks him and slings him up against a wall. She like fucking chucks him down an elevator shaft.
I mean, at one
He
point, like he gets his head taken off.
gets his head taken off. He just lands with a thud, and then at some point, and then he just eventually sits up like Undertaker style. It's just so absurd. But just like you were talking about with Leech Woman, like she's such a fun character, but no disrespect to her and no disrespect to Charles's thought process, but she's the most pointless character of all of the puppets because like without her victim, like you said, being incapacitated, she has no value, no powers. There's nothing scary about her. It's literally just like, yeah, if you are sleeping and wake up to that, that can be terrifying. Or if you're tied down, yeah, but you could just she could be standing there on the floor like trying to do her scary leech regurgitation thing as you're walking by, and you could just look at her and just be like, you could just kick her across the floor or just walk on by and just be like, ew, that's gross, and then just continue about your day. It's so just funny when it comes to that. But I mean, I always loved that Pinhead being flung around scene because it's pretty absurd, but it's so much fun. And again, like dude, Tunnel's a brutal man. Like he's really gets down. Like I said, like he brutalizes that one bitch, and just you just hear it. You don't even see it, man. You just hear it, and it's a wrap on that. But I also do love the fact that like Puppet Ma Demonic Toys pretty much stuck to their main power players. But I always did love the fact that if you got into the Puppet Master series and you continued it on, that's where you got other characters because this Puppet Maker and Puppet Master had more characters, more plans, and more creations. And again, like I said earlier, you've got Six Shooter, you've got Torch, you've got this other characters that get brought into the franchise as long as you stay a fan of the franchise, or at least just stay curious enough to watch a few more movies after that. But I mean, it's just such a bizarre type movie. And, Blade, like you said, with his eyes and the spikes, there's always this little bit of like unique kind of perverted, like, ah, type of way that he loves to react to things that kind of get him off.
He's watching the two have sex. He's like, ooh, yeah.
Yes.
He's an old pervert.
He definitely is for sure. And I mean it's an interesting type thing, and it's got a very bizarre like ending to the movie because it's got this fountain of youth factor to it, and the way that the movie ends with like the surviving characters carrying what you thought was a statuesque taxidermy dog, and no, we've brought the dog back to life. And it's just kind of like this very interesting way of tying into the reason why the puppets are what they are and showing that you can tie it into real life and bring things back as well. And that's what ultimately also leads, again, both series have multiple sequels, but they really show that there's potential. And again, they tap into all that potential, but that there is potential and real storytelling behind the puppet maker, the puppet master, why these puppets are able to come to life, what do they do, and that the ability to reanimate something isn't just shout out to Barbara Crampton, who's also in Reanimator, by the way, but the ability to reanimate and the idea of that it doesn't just pertain to these puppets, but it can be used for other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing I always liked about this movie too is like when you find, when you find out that the boyfriend is kind of he killed himself, but then he uses the tool on magic to bring himself back to life, and you know they start, then he goes and it does the old switcheroo, like learn you don't learn anything when you reanimate dolls that are evil anytime, and they kind of are, you kind of control them a little bit, you are their master, but don't bite the hand that feeds you, or
Right.
don't bite the hand that feeds your hand, or whatever you want to say it in this case, because that's what he does. He kind of goes, fuck you toys, I don't need you anymore, and they're like, well, yeah, we're gonna take you out, bitch, because we're a lot more stronger than you, and blah blah blah, like, we'll just do what we do. And I love the fact that when he cuts his finger, he's bleeding, and apparently they made his blood green because they didn't want they didn't want an X rating and stuff like that with his fingers being chopped and too much blood and stuff like that. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's like so weird. It's like, they eventually, save the day. He goes like that. The puppet masters of that. You're like, oh yeah, she saved the day. And then like you said, yeah, she's just walking around with the White Witch's taxidermist dog, and then all of a sudden it's just like
That was
it's
weird.
completely taxidermist. Then all of a sudden it just goes, oh, what are we gonna do? And now it's a real dog, and you're like, well, how the fuck did that just happen? Like when it's
Yeah,
just like just randomly,
there
like
was no context behind it.
yeah, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna, oh, okay, the dog's alive now. What the shit? But yeah, I love the fact that like that. I mean, even like the creepy people who work there, like the girl, like when she was watching her do all the kind of stuff that she was doing, they're like, oh, weird. But even like I said, like she's not paying attention either. Like the White Witch goes to her and goes, oh, stay away from the fireplace, and she's like, whatever, weirdo. What happens? She gets killed by the fireplace. It's like she told you to stay away from the damn fireplace, but anyway, I always thought it was kind of weird. I always thought the main guy kind of looked like Ron White for some reason. Even when I'm watching it now, he still looks like Ron White. I'm
That
waiting to
is
be
funny.
like, I'm waiting for me like they call me Tater Salad or something like that throughout this movie. But yeah, I always, like I said, when it comes to the ending, I'm always like, it's kind of weird. But then, like I said, it ties it in. Obviously too. That's the one thing I like about the continuations for a while. They actually kind of sort of continue on with their story. So
For
I've
sure.
always liked it. And like I said, I thought Puppet Masters, versus like with the demonic toys, I still think demonic toys is probably the best of the series. The
Sure.
first one. I do, like I said, I do love the Puppet Master one. I do love the Doll Man one, but I still think that the first one, where Puppet Master, I still think Puppet Master one is probably still the best, but they are still they they kept their consistency of movies were always subpar with each other. Eventually they have a couple in their series that weren't nearly as good. But when you're making, I think there's like fucking 12 freaking, how many of them are there now? Let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. At least nine on this one, but I think they had a couple more come
There's,
out.
yeah, there's
So,
more because I have,
so,
as far as
so
I
there's
know,
at least like 10 or 11 out there right now.
and there's a Blade standalone movie as
and,
well.
and the Blade standalone. So you got to realize after
There's
13,
like
12,
13 or
13
14.
movies, you're gonna always have a couple misses. But in general, I always thought that they kept pretty consistent with it. You know what I mean? There some were, like I said, always some were better than others, but they were still decent. You know what I mean? They were always decent sequels.
Definitely, for sure, man. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the obituaries, man, as we get ready to kind of like compare them against each other and see ultimately where we get the victory for this. So when it comes to Puppet Master, man, how do you like it, Devil?
I mean, for me, like I said, I've always liked this movie. I've always loved it. Obviously, like I said, I'm a huge fan of it. Like we said, even with demonic toys, I mean, I'd love to give this, a 10, 12, 100 out of a 10. But in all honesty, it's not going to be it. It's not the perfect movie. Like I said, there's definitely some flaws. Like I said, I wish that they would have had the puppets in there a little bit longer. I wish we would have had a little more scenes with them and stuff like that. Because like I said earlier, you really throughout the whole movie, even though it's kind of weird, it's an hour and a half movie, and you would think, but because they're such quick scenes with the puppets that most of the time that it's literally only like five minutes or so is a screen time is with the puppets. So I kind of wish, especially with as much but then again, maybe at that time it was a little harder to shoot and stuff like that because they weren't like puppets like, you know, Kermit the Frog kind of labyrinth, Jim Henson puppets. They're, you
No,
know,
you can
they're
also
they're
clearly see like
more
the green,
marionette puppets, kind of
and
like.
you can see the green screen edges around the puppets when they're moving. Again, this is the late 80s and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's like, like I said, so with that technology, I wish they, maybe like I said, which is probably why later on in the series they get a little bit more action with when it comes to the screen time for the puppets. But yeah, for me, it's always been my favorite of it. It's just a fun movie. Like I said, I do like other ones in the series, and like I said, I do love when they start bringing some more characters. Like you said, I really love Sharpshooter. I'm a huge Torch fan too. I think Torch is awesome. They start, with the toys now. They start getting a little bit better, where they're like, okay, they're a little bit more simplistic, but they ones that could really mess you up. Like we said, Leech Woman's still always going to be there and there. But yeah, it's like that. Even with like Jester, you know what I mean? He's just kind of there, and he's just kind of like I want to change my face. Ooh, I want to change my face. Ooh, happy. Oh,
No,
sad. I
like
mean,
no pun intended, he is literally comic relief.
yeah, he's really kind of just sort of I guess, like, I wouldn't go and call as far as saying the mastermind, but maybe like the supervisor of everybody, sort of, where he's just kind of like, okay, yeah, okay, this person's over there, this killing there, whatever, this person's coming, he doesn't, he doesn't kill anybody, he never does anything. So you're like, but then again, he's never really being attacked either. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? No one's, they're like, this guy's not a threat. So it's kind of like, but with that, but like I said, when it comes to this, yeah, I'm definitely not going to give it much of a higher score. Like I said, to me personally, like I said, I think it's a higher one. But if I go with demonic toys, which I agree with you, with demonic toys being a 6, I'd have to give Puppet Master just a little bit of a more of an edge, just because I think the storyline of the movie was a better storyline overall, as far as like, with the friends coming here and stuff like that, the old backstory of Toulon and all that. I like the characterization of each of the demonic of the puppets. Like I said, the demonic toys though I thought were a little bit more entertaining because of the fact that they were a little bit more kind of in your face, where most of these guys were kind of just like serious, you know what I mean, other than a couple little bit comic relief, with Blade with his poking eyes when during the hoopty doopy, and even like the even Leech Woman in the beginning, where he's getting the leeches on him, he's like, ooh, that's nice, what is that, until he finds out what it is, and he's like, ah. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's like, okay, whatever. But I mean, so for me, I mean, I'm gonna go a little bit higher, but I'm not gonna go much higher. I'm not gonna go astronomically. I'm not gonna give this like a 8 or a 7.5. I'm gonna go 6.5 with the first Puppet Master.
I get you, Devil. No worries. So ultimately, this is going to give you the victory. I'll precurse this is because I give it a 6. I match them up. I do like, I do think that overall the demonic toys movie has stronger characters, stronger villains, which allow for those breakout series. But here's the thing, though, is that again, they've got that Freddy Krueger aspect to them where comedy, vocals, things are in their favor. It's not that I don't think the characters in the Puppet Master series aren't great. They are. Um, I do think there is strength, a bigger strength in the characters of demonic toys. I just think they're stronger villains. Now, however, that being said, like you said, the story though of the Puppet Master, the trajectory arc is stronger because Demonic Toys is designed as a possessed killer toys movie where you've got the little satanic son of a bitch, pulling the strings and making them dance and sicking them on people. And again, the spin-off, there's the secondary Demonic Toys movies are solid. I like Demonic Toys versus Puppet Master. And again, the Baby Oopsie movies are so fun. The Jack Attack movie, I honestly think is really underrated. I think it's a lot of fucking fun. Um, so I do like the strength of the characters, but the ability of Puppet Master to be able to have a backstory of going back to Nazi Germany, that kind of, die almost kind of that Diary of Anne Frank feel to it is something I really, really like. Do I think they really needed to stretch it out over like 14 movies? Fuck no. There is a small part of me that's like, stop. Charles, I love you, brother, but stop squeezing blood from that stone, man. I kind of wish that they had done a few less movies, but still kept the movies like the Blade solo movie, the Doctor Death movie, that you and I recently met the actor of that movie. Um, I kind of wish they had done a little bit more of that and not really stretched this out so far. But I do think that the overall ability for Puppet Master to truly tell a story is what gives it that strength. So I do stand by my six. I think they match up. As far as just overall comparison, enjoyable movies that some people might turn off and other people might watch through. Um, with my six to your 6.5, that gives it a 6.25 overall, which is something that we don't do. It's always a swinging of the needle. But again, I do swing it understandably, and I do give you that the stronger story and the ability to not only go back, and I'm a sucker for backstory, but the ability to go both backwards and forwards is just stronger in Puppet Master, where while I do think the villains are, for lack of a better term, better in demonic toys, there's more versatility in Puppet Master, and I think that's ultimately what swings the needle.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even where we if we were going in, we were tying it was what I was gonna employ for at least for that maybe that little bit of edge to Puppet Master. One, it was the precursor. It came before Demonic Toys. Like I said, so Demonic Toys, probably got that those characters became more animated, more alive because they kind of figured, okay, maybe these were some of the gripes about the original Puppet Master versus that. Like I said, you add William Hickey into it. That's a little extra bonus. Plus the fact that not saying that they didn't sell toys, but I can guarantee you that Puppet Master and Puppet Master series is probably the number one selling full moon as far as statues, characters, and stuff like that. Where you got everything for that. And not that they didn't make demonic toys, not that they haven't made
They
other.
did. They
They
made
have.
Jack. They made Oopsie.
Yeah, they've made some of those. There's like you said, you have the Killjoy, Killjoy one and stuff like that. They definitely have made other characters, but I feel like Puppet Master is their biggest seller when it comes to merchandise and stuff like that, whether it be toys, whether it be that action figures or lunch boxes and all that stuff. So like I said, even though like I said we were gonna bump the needle up to Puppet Master, that was gonna be my ploy to if it was a tie where we usually do stuff by maybe based on like I said we've done before, or maybe based on cast or the fact that one is the OG or something like that. But then, like I said, we don't really tie into it as much when it comes to merchandise because most movies, maybe that we talk about, doesn't have much of a merchandising kind of thing. Where this was, definitely very like the Star Wars or and things like that. It was definitely Charles Band definitely seen that side of it, where, like Spaceballs, merchandising, we got fun Spaceballs, a flamethrower. I mean, that's pretty much Charles Band in a nutcase, like pretty much every movie he's ever done from everything. Like you said, Subspecies, Gingerbread, Evil Bong. I mean, he literally has figures, action, everything for every series. I mean, he probably, in all honesty, he probably makes more money on his merchandise than he probably does his actual movies.
Yeah,
Just because he
the
knows how he
merchandise
just knows,
pays for the movies.
yeah, or that, like I said, that money that he makes from that, yeah, definitely pays for him to be able to continue on for 30, 40, almost years of still making full moon movies. Like I said, he's still making them, so it's awesome. So that was gonna be my, if it came down to where it was gonna be a tie. That was gonna be my little spiel of why Puppet Master. Plus, like I said, motherfucker, we are the winners. We will get you.
No, absolutely, my friend, for sure. So, Fangs and Infernos, there it has been spoken, and forever there it shall stand. So, when it comes to our current little full moon showdown of toys and evil toy horror, we are giving victory to the devil on this one as Puppet Master at a 6.5 takes out Demonic Toys at a 6.0. But, Charles, hey, we love you, brother. Thank you for everything that you've given myself and Devil. We love your movies. We love your company. We're always going to be fans and we can't wait to see what you do next. So make sure that you guys are checking out Full Moon. If this is your first kind of, knowledge or understanding or hearing of Full Moon Productions, please go out and check them out. I mean, Charles is fantastic. And if killer toys aren't really your thing, there's so many more things. He's done movies like Quadrant, which have kind of a Jack the Ripper feel to it. Of course, if I've got other Fangs out there, you've got the Subspecies series. If you like killer clowns, there's Killjoy, there's Ginger Dead Man, and there's also a lot of crazy hybrid movies. There's a
Yeah.
movie that Devil and I touched on in a previous showdown. He did a very, very cool video game movie called Arcade for any of
Yeah.
our nerds out
Crash and Burn, Crash and Burn. He's got a
there.
lot. If you're into sci-fi, a lot of stuff is very science fiction. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's all over the map when it comes to Charles. It's
He did
not strictly just horror.
Cannibal Women of the Jungle Death Race with Mrs. Gene Simmons in that movie, actually.
Yeah.
With Shannon Tweed in there. But that is for another conversation. But Fangs and Infernos, please go out and check out Full Moon. They're fucking awesome. We love Charles. We love Richard. They've been great to us. So, again, that is the way it shall be. 6.5 to 6.0, Puppet Master takes out Demonic Toys. Fangs and Infernos, please, by showing us love and by supporting us, please go out and support Mark and Lizzie. With Rock and Horror Apparel. That is where all of your official Vampire and Devil merch can be found under the Vampire and Devil collab category at rockandhorror.com. Make sure that you're showing a lot of love to Twisted Vines. They do handcrafted horror decor. Blade agrees, and so does the Devilly Blade agree as well. So support Saren and Chris with everything that they do at Twisted Vines. And of course, if you like it hot, it's getting into cold weather, man. You definitely want to enjoy your tea. Brutalities. That is the way to warm your bones and be so many flavors, so much amazing, amazing stuff. You've got pumpkin bread, you've got Nosferatu brew, there's deep blue tea, I think is what it was called. But you've got the Mrs. Vamp loves her sharks. So many amazing things. Devil and I could go all day when it comes to that. And of course, please make sure that you're supporting independent businesses, awesome museums, and also points of interest. Our buddy Chris owns the Buffalo Bill House. It's an amazing place to stay, as well as our friend John, who owns the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. But Fangs and Infernos, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you guys, and we'll be back soon enough. That's the way it's going to be. We're signing off for this showdown for Full Moon. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Saren Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor. Come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror. You want to scare your neighbors. You want to conjure up a friend to talk to. You want to conjure up somebody bad. You want to do some bad stuff to them. You go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape monster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So, again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast. And make sure that you, Fangs and Infernos, are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So, absolutely, my friend. Of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted
Oh
Vines.
yeah.
Hey, it's the devil here, and we're here to talk more about devils in the movies. And this time we're going to talk about, well, some Bill and Ted bogus journey. Yeah, they go down to hell, see the devil for a couple seconds. It's not like the album covers. But anyway, who likes Bill and Ted? Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. What can you not say that's not awesome about Bogus Journey? Come on. You got the Reaper, Death, playing the bass. You got Station. And you got Killer, Bill and Ted Robots. You should check it out, especially the scene with the devil, because the devil always makes movies better. Even Bill and Ted.
Fangs and Infernos, people we love. Baby, it's cold outside. And nobody feels better about that than your beloved vampire. And nobody hates that more than our fiery devil. So, devil, my friend, I see. Yes, it's that time of year again. We did it before. We're going to do it again. So, you, my beloved, must suffer through it. Let's talk winter.
Yeah, this is gonna, we talk about bad and evil things, and we're gonna talk about those in this movie too, in the movies that we're gonna discuss. But nothing is more brutal or more horrible than the dreaded four-letter S word. And I don't mean poop or shit for you young kids. I'm talking about snow. We hate the snow because we know when it snows, it's gonna be cold. And like the vampire said, the devil does not like cold. I like it hot, hot, hot. I like summertime. I like seeing skin, and you can't see skin in the wintertime unless you want to be a hosicle, which sometimes you see some of those, and I don't mind those because pop them in the microwave a little bit, unnuke them, eat them up. You're all good to go. But yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about winter horror. And we got kind of a interesting combo of movies. We're bringing it back to the Stephen King books for all you people out there. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the Dreamcatcher,
Yeah.
a little bit of horror, a little bit of alien, a little bit of comedy in there, and stuff like that. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about what do you do if you're stuck in the woods and you're hungry? Do you eat your comrades or do you not? We're gonna talk about Ravenous with a bunch of good people that I love about the movie. We got David Arquette, which we've met before. I love David
Yeah.
Arquette, so yeah, it's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be an interesting fight for these two movies, but like I said, the main I would say villain of both these movies is that dreaded white shit falling from the sky.
Absolutely, for sure. Daredevil, 100%, brother. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting one too, because like last season we got to pit vampires up against zombies, and this season we're pitting basically aliens up against cannibals. So something that's always been kind of, considered kind of the Freddy versus Jason of other genres, where it's usually, the average, like, of all of our Fangs and Infernos and the average, like, common populace of horror, they kind of look at those showdowns as kind of like vampires versus zombies are super high up there. Same as in like vampires versus werewolves, very commonly like pitted up against each other. When it comes to this showdown, it's a very, very unique concept that, not to toot our own horn, but to a certain degree, beep beep, because the idea of aliens versus cannibals, that's not something you really, really come across. And you and I batted a couple of movies off of each other when it came to like what we were gonna pick when it came to this. And I think the idea of this makes for a very interesting showdown that we're going to get into right now. One of the movies that we were talking about, Misery, classic, Stephen King. We love it to death. It's fantastic. Kathy Bates, I mean, we love her to death. But looks like we're going to save that one for another time. But we decided that as far as comparisons go, this is going to be a really interesting thing. And this is why, because as sort of a precursor before we officially get into the breakdowns of these movies, is that both of these movies are considered, as far as like the big business and Hollywood goes, both as flops, and both as theatrical flops on kind of epic levels. Dreamcatcher, not as much so, but Ravenous, even still to this day, is considered an epic bomb. It was a something in the ballpark of like a $12 million budget, only made 2 million still to this day. And then when it came to, Dreamcatcher, it didn't make back its budget. I don't remember the numbers as quite offhand, but like at least to my knowledge with Dreamcatcher, I don't think it made back its budget either. But if it did, the whole concept in Hollywood was for a movie to be considered successful, you have to make back twice its budget, because that is the consideration also for like, marketing and publicity and interviews and blah blah blah, yada yada yada. But neither of these movies are considered successes in any way. They're both considered pretty epic failures. But here's what I also love about what we do, and that, however, is not a beep beep situation. That's what I love about the horror community, is a movie that Siskel and Ebert, and I'm not shitting on Siskel or Ebert, it's just they're the names and critics. I'm using them for my example. Horror fans are not going to look at movies on the same level as a Siskel and Ebert are going to look at it, because that is their job, is to critique and rank and basically build the possibility of Oscar situations. Horror fans, we want to be entertained. We want our movies to kind of make sense. We want to laugh if it falls into that criteria. Of course, Devil, you and I are big Trauma fans, big Full Moon fans. We want to laugh if it's applicable for the certain movie that we're watching. And the bottom line is, we want that little bit of time that we're giving to this fantasy to enjoy our fantasy and go from there. Horror fans, we're fickle and we're very judgy at times, but we're relatively simplistic. But anyway, that being said, we've got alien horror and Dreamcatcher, which we're about to get to now, followed up by Ravenous when it comes to cannibalistic horror. Both of these movies, the casts are fucking epic. Like, I hadn't seen Ravenous in a while and had forgotten what a great cast that had of such like acclaimed actors, kind of like coming together in an interesting way. David Arquette, for example, might not have been the biggest name of the actors in that movie, but he was at the time involved in what it was building up to be an incredibly lucrative and important franchise. However, right now, though, when it comes to Dreamcatcher, I mean, dude, you had Jason Lee, you had Morgan Freeman, you had an insane cast when it came to that. Thomas Jane, who we talked about in a previous showdown with Deep Blue Sea. And of course, a lot of people know him from like The Punisher. Oh, excuse me. But you had Damian Lewis and you had, Donnie Wahlberg. I mean, when it came to cast versus cast, Dreamcatcher was up there, man. It was pretty insane. But both of them are really insanely cast, but also properly cast. So that's going to be a really interesting thing that we get into. But anyway, Devil, when it comes to Dreamcatcher, very cool concept. You've got this group of friends who like have these powers that they've developed. And ultimately, you've got near death experiences meeting up in the woods for kind of their bro getaway. And then one of them's epically squashed by a car and survives, heals in a certain way because of said situation, and is able to still make the bro out. And then them going into this cabin is what sets it up for a very interesting story of just alien, implications, alien possession, you know, as well as, the idea very similar to something like Cabin Fever, where like the reservoir getting poisoned actually does have a storyline in this movie that we'll get into when it's necessary. But just the idea of this movie, again, based off a Stephen King book, the idea of aliens possessing bodies, looking to take over the world, or at least take over that overall area that might lead to the world. But it's a really interesting concept, and one that I thought was actually executed very well. I saw the movie in the theater and I loved it then. I still really enjoyed it now. I understand different issues. I understand little plot holes, little nuances, little weirdness, but overall, this is a movie that I've overall enjoyed. And while it definitely still fell into the category of a flop, it was never a flop to me, Devil. I always thought this movie was pretty cool.
Yeah, same to me. Like I said, I mean, not only like you said before, the fact that it's a Stephen King movie, it definitely has that Stephen King feel to it too. You know what I mean? Especially just like the camaraderie of like the kids and stuff like that. When you get like the backstory of like how they all kind of met and how they hung out, and then you get the backstory of Duddits, their friend, and stuff like that. It's very like Stand By Me, kind
Yes.
of like have that Goonies kind of feel to it, where it's like a bunch of kids and stuff like that. But yeah. I'm like, and then with the alien, like, I mean, what's not to like then aliens coming out of your asshole? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, that's it's like
Oh, it
they're
hurts.
the jokes. You gotta have the fart, the dick and fart jokes, and they definitely have those enough in this where they I ate some berries and he's like, oh, and then obviously you adding Jason Lee and his comedy timing and stuff like that throughout it. It's just fun. It's just weird seeing Jason Lee not in a Kevin Smith movie or not My Name Is Earl. Every time I see him out of those two roles, I'm like, oh yeah, he did do other movies too, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that he did other movies. You kind of because like I said, whenever I think of Jason Lee, I literally just think of Kevin Smith movies or My Name Is Earl. It's like the main thing I think of. But yeah, I mean, who doesn't love it? Like I said, you got the them all going to this cabin, like you said, with the aliens and stuff like that. It was such a cool little concept, just like the little weird nuances that I like about it, where like even like in one scene where they're trying to, they're going over with the helicopters and they're getting ready to like bomb this area and stuff like that, or attack the alien spaceship and stuff like that. You hear like them all in their heads with like little kids like, help me, we're stuck here, we're really and like they kept going, oh, you got to remind yourself that those aren't little kids down there, they're the aliens. And it basically shows you like the aliens kind of like going, trying to get them to, think that they're little kids stuck there so they don't bomb them. But, Morgan, you gotta love Morgan Freeman's characters. It's just like, let's just light them all up. He don't give a shit. He's just like a no take, no give a shit kind of commander and stuff like that. So I always like that. But yeah, I always love the
It's
camaraderie
it,
behind
it's like
that.
Morgan Freeman playing God before Bruce Almighty.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, and even adding in earlier, like you said, you got, the main guys that are all together. We talked about, Thomas Jane, everybody knows from, the Punisher.
Yeah.
You got to meet him in, as the Crow, in the Crow. Which one was he? Second
Second.
one.
Yep, he
Second
was in
one. Yeah,
City of Angels as
yeah.
like
City
kind
of
of the
Angels
little
Crow,
the
the
little
camera guy.
perverted camera guy.
Yeah, yeah. So you have that, and like you said, we talked about Jason Lee, we talked about Damian Lewis, but the one guy that one of my favorite ones out of that is Timothy Olyphant. I'm a huge fan of Timothy Olyphant, a huge Deadwood fan and stuff like that. So I always love him. I always liked it, his character in this because he's like, this smooth, car dealership kind of guy, and he trying to helps this girl find her keys, and he has the power that we talk about, how each of them's got like some kind of special little gift that he got, and he can find things, and he uses his finger to find things, and he thinks he's gonna, he's like, hey, if I find your car keys, or let's go on a date, and the girl's like, sure, whatever,
Yeah.
because she just figures this guy's not gonna find these guys car keys. He just goes right into the water, finds the car keys, and she's like, oh fuck. Yeah, and then you can basically tell, like, hey, we're gonna meet at 8 o'clock, right? And yeah, you can tell that she's like not interested because she's like, that's kind of weird how he just randomly
Yeah.
found these car keys from just talking to her. Like, this guy, did he steal my car keys and throw it in there? Kind of like, she kind of has that feel like he had something to do with it. Because, I mean, either that or like, he is a psychic weirdo, and people were gonna be like, okay, that's a little too creepy too. So it's
Like,
like
did
it
this
didn't really
guy
work
pick
very
my
well for himself.
pocket?
Yeah, did he watch me drop him like from the street? Was he like spying on me like some kind of creeper? Probably wasn't the best tactic of trying to get a chick, but I just love that, he uses those powers. All these guys just use that. Like even the one is a therapist and stuff like that, and he kind of goes after the one guy and starts going into his memories and kind of berates him and stuff like that. So they kind of use these to kind of take advantage, and then when it comes to the aliens, and stuff like that. I love it. I mean, my favorite part of this movie, which I always thought was a really cool concept. I love it because it was a part of the book that was really, really good. Was their like memory warehouse where he had all of his stuff that he had out, and whenever he got new knowledge, he had to like take something out and had to forget this or like lyrics so he can pertain stuff. But I love the fact that that this memory warehouse, the aliens inside of it the whole entire time, trying to like figure out who taught him tricks, and who he talked to that knows about him, about Istagay. We haven't talked about Istagay yet.
No, absolutely. And I like the funny thing is, as entertaining as the earlier part of the movie is, where they're kind of introducing you to like the various, for lack of a better term, like powers or special abilities that these people have. I actually kind of like the way that the movie kind of gets going. It's still sort of a lengthy movie. It's over 2 hours long, but I do feel that they did a pretty good job. And this, again, at the same time, I feel like this just kind of comes with the territory when you're going to do a Stephen King movie, because Stephen's books are so intricately woven that it's very difficult to do an hour and a half and leave it at that. The earlier movies, you kind of were able to do that because I felt that was slightly more just stylistically the way. When you look at a movie like Carrie, it's in the concept of the basically the bubble, the traditional time frame of a movie. But obviously, as movies move on, and you learn things and you understand about the story that you're telling, especially coming out of the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, is when you started realizing, like you mentioned, Shawshank Redemption, like things that have real stories to tell. And it's like, look, I'm sure that a lot of people that are putting movies together do kind of like keep in their brain the idea of like we also need to make sure that we're keeping people's attention, which is very, very difficult. But this movie had a lot of different nuances. But anyway, I did feel that this movie did a very good job building and doing enough, what, like, for lack of a better term, jump scares when it came to this movie, to where if it ever felt it was getting into a lull, that it was able to continue on and keep you entertained and keep you invested, knowing that this movie ultimately, was like 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes, whatever it was, because it built up the characters originally. And then you've got the kind of Shining-esque type situation where they're driving in the snow to the cabin to do the bro out, and they're just having chatter, doing their thing. They nearly fucking smoke this chick that's just chilling in the road, and ultimately she just ends up dying. But they flip their car, they get all fucked up, not in like crazy like injuries where like their arms all broken and it's up here. I just mean like, you get in a car wreck and you flip your car. I mean, you're not going to be feeling too good afterwards, whether you have powers or not. But they're kind of like building up their situation, kind of getting their shit together. And then ultimately is when it actually starts getting into the situation. I mean, I liked, I actually was a big fan of the concept in the way that the possession was done in this whole kind of like challenging this alien character that you don't really understand why they're here or what they're doing, but then this just kind of this like explosion of like, you know, like soot, bacteria, dust, however you kind of want to look at it, to go in through your eyes, in through your nose, like to kind of possess your body that way. And that's ultimately what led to you know, his being, infested, and then doing this split personality thing. And that's what I really loved about the character and what kind of got the movie going for me personally, is I loved this bipolar aspect where they're still talking to their friend, but their friend is not only talking to them in this kind of fucked up weird way, but he's also kind of like conducting the orchestra, or being like the guy that has like the marionettes on strings, as he's kind of like guiding things, because he has this ability of like staying inside and like kind of, because he's got him possessed, and he's able to infiltrate the conversations with his friends. But then he's able to do this different voice, this different style of just very creepy, like, well, you really don't know what you're in for. Or, you know what? This is how I see it, and you're going to kind of bow to my will. It's a very, very kind of interesting thing. It actually reminded me a lot of Michael Rooker's character in Slither, where it was like once he was, infested, it started off him just showing the different nuances of the character, and like, well, he's starting to act kind of odd. And then ultimately until there was the really heavy possession.
Yeah, yeah, I like the concept of, yeah, them kind of like going off with each other, where it would be like, what was that? Him talking to himself the whole entire time. He's like, I could change my voice. Oh, yeah, hey, I could talk like this. It was like, I always thought that was kind of cool with the alien doing that. And even like the scene he's driving by and Thomas James is like, yeah, that's not Dudsy. That's not our guy. Like he can
No.
something he hides and stuff like that. So it's like, I love that. And, like as the aliens infiltrating, trying to figure out like what it's about them and stuff like that, you start figuring out that they gotta go and find duddits. And yeah, I love always thought that was cool. I always like, I guess kind of, I guess he was kind of stereotypically casted a lot, but like Donnie Wahlberg, I mean, very much in this movie sort of like he was in Sixth Sense, where he's just very kind of like sickly and frail. I always loved his character in this movie because obviously he's playing what we believe is a mentally handicapped kid, because you
Yeah.
see him from that. But obviously, there's got to be something different because, like he said, the kid had extra powers that you kind of were not 100% sure what was going on, but you just kind of figured, it's just, eccentric or weird because the kid, this kid, he's a special kid. And then, obviously, like with them giving each one of their powers and stuff like that, being able to do it, they knew he had something else. But obviously, you find out, with him going, becoming older and becoming an adult, he more likely he had some kind of cancer and he was basically dying. And the mom was like, hey man, let's just, I know he's gonna die, but he's gonna die sitting in his room miserable, or he can die with you guys and you guys basically make him happy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So she's just like, yeah, let him go off and do that. And you get into where, yeah, you find out, all of a sudden Scooby Ooby Doo, we got work to do, and boom, you find out that Duddits wasn't really Duddits, and there was even before there was some conversation with the guys that they were thinking that maybe he was an alien or something like that. Well, they were right. He was a different kind of alien, and he was here to stop Mister. I always love it. He said, instead of Mister Gray, it was Mr. Gay. Like, oh, they're always like, why does he keep calling him Mr. Gay? Like, they're like, what the hell? And then, yeah, you find out that it's Mr. Gray. And he's like, oh, how do you know about Mr. Gray? Now, yeah, I love the whole, like you said, the whole cabin fever kind of like, if
Yeah.
you get it, basically, if he gets one worm into this reservoir, it's basically the end of the world because that one worm can infect billions and millions of people.
No, for sure. And that was the thing that I thought was like ultimately very cool about this movie. And so like as we get to the climactic style, as we kind of get towards the obituaries, the idea of like Duddits kind of like putting the characters like out there, letting them know like, but still that same complex of like, I'm Duddits, but I'm kind of not, but I'm going to expose Mr. Gray and I'm going to find a way to yank him out of this character. You and I were talking off the air. We were just having a casual conversation about The Exorcist, and it's kind of that same kind of concept where it was just like the idea of like, well, you've got to get the demon out, Exorcist style, like The Conjuring or things like that. It's the idea of like getting Mr. Gray out and confronting him, and the idea of like, okay, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to infect. You and I have had conversations both on and off the show about things like aliens, with the face huggers, the chest bursters, like how you would infect and how you would keep building your race. That was the thing, and the interesting concept behind this movie was the idea of infecting the reservoir because you're ultimately going to be able to take everybody out. And that was the thing that I always thought was like super duper cool about this movie. And I ultimately liked it on that. And the fact that they were able to turn the tides on Mr. Gray ultimately. But I loved the unique idea. And I remember this so vividly from when I saw it in the theaters 20 years ago. Was while you were watching the conflict, I noticed it in the theaters. And Devil, I'm not sure offhand. Did you see this movie in the theater?
Yep.
Cool. Was the idea of like, I noticed that little worm making its way towards the hatch, but they
Yeah.
only show it for a second. And then it's back into the conflict. And I remember watching this movie being like, is nobody gonna pay attention to the little fucking like what do they call a stowaway, like the little stowaway that's like staying under the radar but like making its way to like the opening of the hatch. And then ultimately they turn the tides on Mr. Gray. They're able to like you know fuck him up and disintegrate him and get him handled. And then right as you're getting ready to see little dude infest the entire reservoir, wham, down comes the shoe. And I was like, damn, just boot stomps on him right as he's getting ready to jump. And I always liked that. It made me laugh in the theater. It made me laugh the other day when I watched the movie for again for review. And it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, but it works. It's that little bit of like comedy that kind of like it works for the fact it's a Stephen King book, but it's like just enough outside the realm that you kind of can't help but laugh at it because it's kind of absurd, but it definitely is understanding of the fact that it's like this little thing thinks it's about to get ultimately get the drop on despite the fact that its master was defeated. We're still gonna win as a race. Nah, not so much. Stomp, it's a wrap. And it did make me laugh a little bit because while it did work as a climactic finish, it did seem a little bit corny to me because right after the stomp, it pretty much went right to credits. And there was a part of me that was kind of like, well, I get it. There's not enough movies that have that kind of be all end all finish where just going to the credits is the proper thing to do. And this is one of those movies that I felt kind of it was the proper thing to do, but it still had a little bit of that campness to it where I was like, yeah, but there didn't seem to be any bit of mid ground though to lead to the credits. That was a little too bizarre to just curb stomp the shit out of this alien and then just roll right to the end of the movie. A little bit bizarre, but still didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my whole thing, before we get into the obituaries, when it came to the movies, when I remember going to theaters and seeing this, and you have the friends and stuff like that, and like I said, Duddits, shows his reveals himself. I'm like nobody went, none of the main, the friends guys go, what the fuck? Like was waiting for that, like the fucking Duddits was an alien, waiting for something like that, or even afterwards or something like that. Be like, oh, that son of a bitch.
Mhm.
I was always expecting that. But yeah, I've always, like I said, I mean, like you said earlier, with it being, wasn't one of the, Stephen King movies have always kind of, when it came to his books and being, turned into movies and stuff, not all of them, you know, were great as far as box office wise, but they were always fun. There were some that I don't like as much as others, but this one I always felt like it was a good movie. I never understood like the hate about it. Yeah, it's a lot different than the book, and there's definitely a lot of liberties that Hollywood took. But I always felt like this one was still a fun movie. I've always liked it. I've always enjoyed this film. Like I said, I mean, I like it now. Just, I mean, it's not one that I go back to and watch constantly all the time, but
Same.
it's one that I've seen, multiple times from going to the theaters and seeing it when it originally came out. So it's always good. It's one that I always remember. Like I said, even having seen this movie like 9 million times, I still remember got it.
Yeah.
I still remember Ooby Gooby Goo, where are you? And it's the gay, you know what I mean? Like I could not watch this movie for 5, 10 years and still remember a lot of those scenes. So it definitely still has a lot of good memories and stuff like that. And like I said, I think the damaging part of it was that, you know, it was expected to be a lot bigger, especially with that kind of budget. Like I said, you have these
Yeah.
actors in it. Like we didn't even talk about it. One of the other guys that was big, Tom Sizemore's
Tom
character is in this
Sizemore,
film.
yes.
So I mean, you got Tom Sizemore, Morgan Freeman. Like I said, you got Timothy Olyphant when he was blowing up. You have Jason Lee, who was already, Kevin Smith, but already in My Name Is Earl. You got, Damian Lewis, who had been, somewhat of an established actor. You got Thomas Jane, that was an established actor. So I mean, I would imagine that a lot of the budget went to just strictly just to the actors in this
Their
film. So
contracts, yeah, Devil,
yeah.
I'm sure.
So it's crazy, yeah. Which like I said, I can understand. It's one of those ones where sometimes just because you have big actors in a movie doesn't necessarily. And even with Morgan Freeman's character in this movie, I love Morgan Freeman. I think he's one of my favorite actors. I didn't really care for him in this movie, and I don't really say that as far as the character because I didn't really like the character was. I just thought Morgan Freeman acting in this wasn't as good as it normally usually is.
He
But
kind
like
of
I said,
felt he
it
kind
could
of
be the
felt like
script,
just
it could be the character wise, but
yeah, he just kind of felt like just a guy.
yeah, like he was just there to be there. Like it didn't seem like as epic as like, oh shit, we got Morgan Freeman in this movie, you
Yeah.
know. You know, definitely, especially with him being, you know, established in, you know, probably one of the greatest Stephen King books of all time with Shawshank Redemption. So,
Yeah.
you know, from him being established with that movie and then seeing this, you're kind of like, wow, that's a different Morgan Freeman. Like I said, it's not necessarily meaning the actor wise and stuff like that. Like I said, sometimes you just because you have a bad script or a bad movie or whatever like that could be what it is. But yeah, his character in this one, I was like I said, the character wise, I didn't really like as much, but I just thought his acting was a little subpar for a normal Morgan Freeman acting.
Yeah. No, I definitely get you on that, Devil, for sure. 100%. So as we get into the obituaries, I mean, honestly, I'll keep it short and sweet. When it comes to the idea of a Stephen King book that comes to film, personally, I do think that Dreamcatcher is very underrated. I I enjoy this movie on a consistent level. Just like you, I don't watch it on the regular. I mean, the movie's been out for, over 20 years now. I've probably seen it about 5 or 6 times overall. I do enjoy it. I like the movie. I see it on my shelf regularly. I do pass it by more, clearly more often than I watch it. But every time I've watched it though, I enjoy it on a high level. I do think it's a really good movie. As far as Stephen King books, they've consistent. Here's the thing. To the common horror populace, a lot of Stephen King movies tend to fall flat compared to Stephen King's books. And I think ultimately that simply has a lot to do with the fact that Stephen's writing is so genuinely on such a higher tier than what can be put on film. Because the thing that's so great about books is your imagination is allowed to run rampant with the reading of the book. Now, you and I are very high on Maximum Overdrive. He's like, fuck that movie as a directorial
Well,
thing.
he was very high on Maximum Overdrive too.
Exactly, for
High
sure.
on that cocaine.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And that is very, very common knowledge. That is put out publicly. But as far as that movie, he doesn't love that movie. You and I love that movie. Like we've had talks off the air as well as even possibly on the air that that movie for us is a 9. Like we love that movie. But like you look at movies like just in the simplest, speediest fashion. Carrie, Pet Cemetery, Christine. Those are and The Shining. Those are the four that I'm just grabbing right off the top of my head. Obviously, when it comes to rating Dreamcatcher, I have to take those into consideration because while I do think the movie was done very well, I do like the casting, I like the execution, I like the way that the budget worked for how it was. I can't give it as high of a rating as I want to, despite the fact that if I'm considering other Stephen King movies, it's simple, excuse me, it simply would not make any sense. So I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 because I do think it deserves that. I do think it's earned that because I like the way that it's written. I like the way it's executed. I like the cinematography shot of it, the way that Winter works for it. I do like the idea of the aliens and the way they were portrayed on film. I like the explosion of like dust for, taking over a person's body with going in through different orifices. I did like that. And again, even the lesser characters of big name actors like Donnie Wahlberg's portrayal, as opposed to as much as we love Morgan Freeman and we consider him up here, his execution of his character is kind of more right here, which is a little bit bizarre and a little bit weird and unique for how we consider him. But again, I don't think it's bad. I don't think he did a poor job with the character. I just think he comes across just like we said, a few moments ago. He just comes across as just a guy. anybody could have been that character. And that's something I consider as well. But when I look at the movies involved with Stephen King that I genuinely do love, Pet Cemetery, Carrie, Shining, Christine, things like that, movies that I consistently consider eights or more. 7.5, I do think does work for this movie, and that is where I like it because I do consider it a high quality movie. I enjoy it, and I do think they did a good job putting his work to film, considering a lot of people in Steven's eyes haven't done as good of a job. But I enjoy it. I think it's a cool time, man. So I like it as a 7.5, Devil.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah, I definitely, I mean, as far as like the Stephen King movies and stuff like that, adaptations, yeah, because they're definitely going to be ones that are the meccas of all that. Even in the very beginning of us talking about this, we talked about Misery and stuff like that. Those would be in ones, and it's like, it's just so many good epic movies. I mean, I even like a lot of the smaller smaller short films and stuff like that that
Yep.
were made into it. I'm a huge Running Man fan and stuff like that. So, I mean, like,
We talked about Silver Bullet not that
yeah,
long ago.
Silver Bullet and things like that. So, I mean, yeah, when it comes to it, I mean, I probably put Dreamcatcher a little bit lower
Okay.
on that Stephen King movie list, but I definitely still put it higher than most people would put it because like I said I've always enjoyed this film and stuff like that. So so for me, like I said, 7.5 is like for going for it where you can only get 8.5, 9.5 and 10. It just makes it a lot harder for a 7.5. I For me, as far as Dreamcatcher, because I have it a little
That's
bit
fair.
lower on that list, but not much lower. I definitely would go with the 7.0 as being a good plateau where it's like, it's definitely above that mid grade. There's a lot worse Stephen King movies out there that have been adapted and ones that people love. I mean, I'll just flat out put it out there right now. A lot of people love Sleepwalkers. I think that is one of the worst Stephen King movies out there.
It's
But there's
You
but
and me
there's also
both,
people
dude.
who
It's
love
so basic.
but there's people who like Langoliers and in the Dark Half and someone like that, and there's a bunch of those ones that I didn't care for too much. Even Thinner, like there are parts of Thinner that I liked, but like I still don't praise those as much as I still put Dreamcatcher above those. But with like you said, with Running Man, with Silver Bullet, with Carrie and It and all these other ones, it's those ones are so much higher than where I put Dreamcatcher as far as a movie. But like I said, I definitely still put it in that high, the high range. So for me, I
Okay.
think a 7.0 is about where I feel that Dreamcatcher is.
Absolutely. No, no worries, Devil. So you and I don't do the 0.25s or the 0.75s, which is okay because we'll circle back around that in a little bit of the conversation. So we're going to have to see ultimately where we kind of swing this pendulum. But let's continue on when it comes to that. So right now, it's not going to be the official score, but we're going to keep kind of the pencil in idea at a 7.25 currently when it comes to Dreamcatcher. But let's cruise our way into Ravenous because this is a lot of movie to dissect. Not in a crazy way, but this is a very unique movie because you know, this is a military, old school, revolutionary Civil War stylish movie. And the thing that's so interesting about this movie is it's a cannibal movie. It's a cannibalistic movie taking place in the winter, directed by a dominantly English director with not a lot of American credits, or for that matter, not a lot of just film credits in general, with an incredibly well designed cast, as in established, but a unique stew. No pun intended, because that's a scene we're going to talk about. But this is a very interesting soup of design because while I don't look at this movie myself as a horror movie, I personally see it as a as like a military drama. it doesn't change the fact that the idea of cannibalism mixed with, like, how do I describe it? The idea of like slight demonic possession, because I love the fact that the Wendigo was involved in this movie, which I think is so cool. And outside of Ravenous, in my personal opinion, there's no movie that's ever come close to getting the concept of the Wendigo right on any level, with the exception of Antlers. Now, that's a diatribe and a conversation for a different time. But this is just a really, really interesting movie because the other thing I like about it is there's a lot of intricacies of other things that weren't very big as far as topics to be tackled in the late 90s. You've got homosexuality that plays its way into this movie, and this is years before something like Brokeback Mountain was even portrayed on the big screen. And again, financially, this is unfortunately considered probably one of the most epic flops as far as just like what it made versus what it spent in the history of cinema. But again, that doesn't change the fact that this movie is so well executed. But the other thing I do want to put out there is I think what made it more difficult to this movie was, as good as it is, and as much as I enjoyed it, and I love the fact you picked it, is I can't imagine this was an easy movie for them to promote, because what direction do you take this in? Like I said, I feel it's got a little bit of that more military drama, almost kind of dramedy feel, because there's a lot of comedy to this movie. I I don't consider this movie really a horror movie per se. The copy of this movie is in my horror section, yes, because I do feel the fights, the blood, the idea of cannibalism and the Wendigo aspects put it there. But to the common, and I'm not even talking about the common populace that you and I refer to regularly, I'm just talking about movie fans in general. I feel this falls a little bit more into military dramedy than it comes into actual horror. And that's one of the things I think that was overall more tricky and a little bit more detrimental to this film's success. But that's not our style. That's not our category. Overall, this is a cool movie, Double, and I love the idea of the casting going into these different zones, especially consider that a lot of these actors are kind of set in their stylistic ways. But the idea of like dealing with a movie that has to deal with military wartime, how you survive, and then is what you're doing to survive proper and morally correct. And that's concepts that I really like about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely throw in the, with when you're categorizing, it's definitely a very like historical kind of
So,
film because yeah, it's
yes.
definitely, even though most people are going to think about the Donner Party, I mean, it's definitely got, parts of the Donner Party, but it's actually more, the story is actually more towards, which I always laugh about. It's always about Alfred Packer, which, if anybody knows anything about Alfred Packer, is what Cannibal the Musical is about with, with Trey Parker and Matt Stone, which
Yes.
this is definitely more of that, more of the story of that. It's definitely more of a historical accuracy, sort of out for Packer, more than the Donner family. But most people more, when it comes to cannibalistic in the Western times and during like, war and during like the Civil War and the, Mexican American War and all this times like that. Most people, that the settlements and the Oregon Trail and all that kind of times of American history. Most people will remember the Donner Party. That's
Yes.
typically the bigger one. But yeah, I mean, I love the fact that yeah, it's just it's cool. It's got I think that because I don't remember the time when this movie came out in 1999, I believe,
I think, yeah.
and I don't remember exactly when the timeline of when he got in trouble. But the more controversial of this movie now, watching it, is
Jeffrey.
definitely Jeffrey Jones. Watching this, it's like okay, but then again, it's one of those ones where like you gotta kind of separate, the actor from from the person. You know what I mean? The famous guy versus the regular human person. You know what I mean? Like, yes, we're not condoning anything whatsoever that Jeffrey Jones has done. Whether he's been. I mean, I can't even say that he's been accused of it because he's actually been charged of it. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, I definitely don't condone that whatsoever. And like I said, I don't glorify that. I'm a huge Jeffrey Jones fan, though. I've always been. Does that, those allegations and those things that go through, does that make me like the guy less? Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
As a human being, yes. But you know what I mean? I'm still gonna watch this movie. I'm still gonna watch Deadwood. I'm still gonna watch Ferris Bueller. I'm still gonna watch Howard the Duck. He's still gonna watch Beetlejuice. I'm still gonna love his movies that he's done, necessarily not liking the actor himself personally. So I think a lot of that probably, because I can't remember what year. I want to think that it was later on after this movie, so he probably hadn't gotten busted for when he got busted. But it definitely would play a fact of maybe not when this movie came out, but with it being now, people will probably like, oh, who's in this movie? And you'll see, Guy Pearce, you see David Arquette, you see this guy and that guy, and then you see Jeffrey Jones, and you're like, oh, yeah, I would have watched this movie, but I don't condone it. And like I said, I mean, if I'm not saying out there that you can't personally have those feelings. If that's you and you don't want to, acknowledge him at whatsoever, and you don't want to watch his films, that's completely cool. But like I
I
said,
looked I looked it up on the fly, Devil. 2002.
so it was a
3
couple
years
years
later.
after, yeah, yeah, after this. But people who are watching it now that may have not have seen this or have watched it within the last few years or something like that are definitely gonna do that. And like I said, I mean, if that's how you want to go and you're like, yep, I won't go. Then hey, man, yeah, like this movie is definitely not for you. I'm not saying that he's got a particularly huge part in this movie,
Yeah.
but he definitely does play. Jeffrey Jones' character definitely does play a role in this film. So
Kind of important.
yeah, that's kind of important. But like I said, I've always liked it. I love the fact that that I found out that there's a lot of meat eating in this movie, and that the main character Guy Pearce is apparently a vegetarian. So that was kind of interesting, where he had to do all this stuff like it. But I've always loved this story. I always thought it was really cool. I love the concept of like this little like post that they have. You know what I mean? I love David Arquette's character. He's just getting stoned constantly the whole entire time with the Indian guy, and you have the doctor that's just drunk all the time and shit like that, that doesn't even remember the stranger even coming in. Yeah, he's like, I don't even remember what he looked like. Well, I was sick that time. Yeah, he was sick because he was on the hair of the dog. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always thought this was a cool movie and a cool concept. And like I said, that going out, the stranger and trying to help him, and then him telling him, and then him explaining the story about like what we had to do to survive, and like people like that. That's what I always love about when it comes to the movies like this, about cannibalism, as far as like survival cannibalism, like this movie and Alive, that people will go, oh, I love both sides of it. I love, oh, I would never do that. And then the ones who go, yeah, I have no problem with that. I always kind of laugh at them, kind of like you need to be sort of in the middle. Like me personally, I think that if it came down to survival, I probably would eat a person
Yeah.
and wouldn't have a problem with it. Maybe keeping it down in your head. But people who would go like, "Oh, there's no way that I would ever do it and do it." I'm like, you don't know what you would or wouldn't do when you haven't ate for like a week, and oh, I'm not gonna eat this, and you're smelling what naturally smells like cooked meat. And from what everybody's always said, from all the historical facts of people who have done cannibalism, and the fact that our bodies are very much like it, is that we basically are like pigs. Our
Yeah,
our bone structure, our fat structure, and cannibalistics. Cannibals have always said that we definitely taste more of like a pig. So I mean, I guess if you don't like pork or don't like bacon or something like that, yeah, maybe you probably wouldn't eat a person. But then again, like I said, man, you're starving, you haven't eaten for days and days, and you're gonna die, and you smell that meat, you're it's going to be a lot more harder to say yes or no. Like I said, I'm not saying that people won't, you know what I mean? Like I said, you could definitely be firm on your grounds and say that you wouldn't. But I always love that debate because there's always that moral thing. It's like, do you do that or do you not do that? Now, like I said, when it comes to the movie, and as far as this movie wise, where different versus alive, where this guy gets the taste of blood and gets the taste of meat and wants to keep doing it and keep killing, and it's kind of that, like you said, that Wendigo kind of feel to it where I love in this movie, whenever you eat the person you gain their strength. They naturally heal from wounds and things in this movie, which is definitely more of a fantasy realm of it, or people, or at least in the folk area of stuff like that, especially with the Wendigo, being the Native American and stuff like that, things and stuff like that about that's the part with the power and stuff like that. But like I said, when it comes down to it, you know what I mean? It's like, who who says that, more like I said, if somebody naturally died, you're froze to death and you gotta eat them. Fuck it, I'm chomping on your butt.
absolutely. No, 100%. But I also just love the idea of the playing out to the final showdown kind of thing. And that was the thing I always thought was also really strong about this movie is there were a lot of just well thought out and executed like choices made when it came to the fight scenes. Ideally, the main fight scene, and we still, we got a couple of points that we'll touch base on before we officially get to the obituaries, but we're kind of in that realm as well. The idea of that ultimate showdown as well. Because the one thing I always thought was kind of funny about the average movies fight scenes, even high budget fight scene movies, was the idea of when injuries in a fight happen, does it actually is it portrayed on film the way it should be? And I really liked the way they did it in this because it was the idea of like if you've been stabbed, if you've been slashed, if you've been hurt. And I liked the concept of that as well because the idea of like them kind of acting almost like drunkards in that scene is ideally, and again, I have been fortunate that in all of my many, many years of life and existence, I've been able to avoid just enough stakes and just enough swords to avoid actually being stabbed. So I do not have a personal reference to what that feeling is. But the idea of but I've had enough injuries and have enough cuts and broken bones and situations happen to me getting, violently hit by large mechanical machines that I've suffered my fair share of things that still have needed to be healed to understand that when an injury of some level happens, it plays it's a factor in what you're trying to accomplish. And that was something I actually really loved about the cinematography and the actor and the acting and the editing of the showdowns in this movie was that it felt that they actually were trying to continue on and win these battles with genuine injuries holding them back. And that was something I also really, really liked about Pierce's final scenes when it came to those as well. Because not only do you have the idea as well of not only having a vegetarian guy who's genuinely eating meat, because I did some research on this, and while, yes, he did spit it out when it came to cuts, it didn't change the fact that he refused to go Hollywood and be like, you have to make my soup vegetarian. He's like, no, I can't eat it because it's against my life beliefs or whatever. But he wasn't on a soapbox level of wanting
Gotta be
to make
tofu or something.
exactly like it wasn't on a level of like, hey, I don't even want it portrayed technically correctly on film. He's like, no, I want it to be real. I will take care of myself, but this is what I'm gonna have to do, kind of a thing. And I really think that Pierce deserves a certain amount of recognition for that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, I love just even the fight scenes in the beginning. You know, they go to the cave. You find out when they finally get to the cave, and you find the story. You find out that this guy really wasn't the who he said he was, and that he's the one that's been eating all these people, and he just goes after and starts throws a tomahawk and kills the one guy and goes after chases after the other dude, and he's just going and bringing them back in. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get a lot of meat and stuff like that." And even like Guy Pearce's character, that's why I love it. Even in the beginning of it, they talk about where he was basically a coward and basically hid from the enemy, and they brought him back behind enemy lines, and then he was stacked above all his dead. Dead his dead
Yeah.
commanders and all his military friends, and they asked like, how did he naturally get you know, enough strength and courage to go behind the lines and capture the enemy behind lines. And it's basically you talked about like in the beginning with all the blood dripping into his mouth. He just basically consumed so much blood that it was like that concept where they talk about where in this where yeah, it basically kind of amped him up, gave him somewhat of a superpower, and that's how it was. Or even in this one, I mean, he, you know, stupidly, I mean, he's going and he's fighting this guy, and it's just him, and he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna jump off this huge giant cliff and try to catch the branch," but yeah, he doesn't catch the branch very well and hits every branch on the way down the whole entire time. How he doesn't die from that? I mean, that tree had to have been like 700 feet tall too, because he's literally going down, hitting every branches, and eventually like hurts his leg and falls down, and then miraculously that doesn't even bother him. It's the roll down the hill for 4 hours that eventually gets him. It just got to the point where it was like a comedy, like 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 a old school comedy routine, like like the Three Stooges or something like that, just rolling, tossing down this hill that he ends up getting on top of the other guy that was kind of dead and sort of still alive, and tossing him around, and then he gets trapped in the cave, and then that's when he falls through the hole, and that's when he hurts his leg. Out of all, between everything that he did, it was the very last thing that was falling into this hole that he broke his leg. No other injuries before that, which was like, okay, whatever. But then, like I said, he's sitting there, he's got the dead guy. What's he gonna do? He's gonna eat, and then even the guy goes, "Yeah, I saw where you're hidden, saw what happened to your guy. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You want to try to be different than me, than that, and that's what I love about this was like, both of them are taking that cannibalistic, route, or even that Wendigo kind of route. But the difference is that Guy Pearce's character kind of did it more for survival,
Yeah.
and the other guy's character is definitely more just he's got that taste. It's like when when a dog bites another dog or a human or something like that. And once an animal gets a taste, or even just a wild animal in general, once an animal gets a taste of blood and human flesh, they kind of crave it and need it, and that's what his kind of character was throughout this whole entire time. So I love
Yeah.
the fact that that yeah, they were different, and then basically he was like, he goes to the one person that obviously the her brother had died, but he goes to the girl that was there, the Native American girl, and was like explaining that, and she was like, no, that there's no way to kill a Wendigo. You basically gotta sacrifice yourself. And like you said, I love the very ending where yeah, they're fighting and stuff like that, and he's just like, you know what, this is, they're fighting, and one guy's like, yeah, this is like kind of trivial. Why are we fighting? We're not gonna do anything. And boom, falls onto a bear trap, and he's like, ooh, that's very, very sneaky. But I love the whole concept was like, you better hope that you die first, or I
Yeah.
die first. Because if you die first, I'm definitely gonna eat you, which is gonna make me live. And but then he was like, but then again, if I die first, are you gonna let yourself die or are you gonna eat me? And that was kind of like the whole time it's playing, you're kind of like wondering, is Guy's gonna character going to? And even when that scene where he kind of gets up, you're kind of looking like he might. It's like maybe he's having second thoughts of dying, but then he was like, you know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna, kill us both. But yeah, I love that. I just love that whole concept. Even like I said, with the guy was like, yeah, you better hope that I die first because I'm eating your ass if you if you don't. I love that. And it's just cool. It's just like cool. It's a cool concept of a but way to keep because you're stuck in this bear trap. There's nowhere for you to go. It's a cool a cool way to kill somebody. And like how often do you see people being killed in bear traps? So you know what I mean. It was a cool little visual, and I just love the whole concept of it where the guy was like willing to like yeah, I probably shouldn't be going around because even guy probably even thinking, his character was like, if I eat him and survive, will I become like him?
Yeah.
Or can I go back to being a normal person again? And he's like, probably not. I'm gonna have that sensation of blood. So the best way is just to take us both out in the heap of a bear trap.
Absolutely, there, my friend, for sure. And Devil, ultimately, that brings us over to the obituaries. It was as we prepare to kind of wrap up this showdown and kind of see where we swing the needle on things. And hey, man, like as we say, your movie, your lead, Ravenous, man. Where do you look at it?
I mean, like I said, to me, it's one of those ones. Like, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's a it's considered a box office failure. A lot of people might not like it. See, to me, I've always loved this movie. It's always been a huge favorite of movies of mine. I like it because it's got sort of almost everything that I enjoy. I mean, there's a little bit more stuff it could have. It could have some female skin in the game, but
There's
but
one female in the whole movie.
yeah, yeah, it's like yeah, one female, and like I said, I'm not poking shots at her, but she's no Farrah Fawcett, you know what I mean? So, but anyway,
Right.
I mean, but even then, it was to the point where like even a side boob of hers would have still been a little bit nice. But anyway, but yeah, it's like to me, it's like this movie always have everything. I'm a huge fan of obviously the gore and the horror aspect of it. Huge fan of the Dahmer party and and Alfred Packer and all that cannibalistic kind of stuff. I'm a huge fan of like historical things and westerns and military films and stuff like that. I love the fact that it's just a cool concept where these guys are all sort of like the government kind of gave them promotions but don't want to deal with them, so they're kind of like in this land of misfit toys kind of feel to where that when they got stuck over in this part, and he's like, yeah, you're in California, yeah, yeah, but yeah, you're in California, yeah, maybe during the summertime it's nice to live there, but where they're at in the wintertime it sucks. It's definitely not a best place to be stationed. They stuck you here for a reason because they don't care about you and don't want you anymore, but they just want you out of the way. But yeah, I mean, I've always liked that. Like I said, I've always been a huge fan of this film. I've always just liked the whole concept of it. I love the visuals of it. You know what I mean? It's just everything. You know what I mean? Even just the little things, like even the soldier character where he's just, oh yeah, we have the soldier, and he just like in the freaking freezing water, with the snow around him, going bear hugging himself and shit like that. So I always thought it was just a cool movie, and like I said, then adding in the comedy side of David Arquette's character and stuff like that the whole time. Like okay, go out and get meat and potatoes and all that. No women, no women. He's like, oh, what if we get a couple women? No women. Oh, what the hell? What about some weed? We can get some of that, can we? Okay, we can probably get some of that, or some peyote or something like that. Yeah, he's all about doing that. He was like, but yeah, I thought it was just fun and just like his character, dying in the roof and R.I.P. to Dave Arquette's character in that movie. But anyway, like I said, I've always thought this was a cool movie. I always thought it's very original. I mean, yeah, there are other movies that deal with historical of this time period, but don't really mix in that Native American Wendigo kind of cannibalistic kind of ties to it. I mean, there have been a couple, like you said, the Antlers is a cool one. There was a movie called Tomahawk that came out years
Um,
ago with Kurt Russell that I really, really liked that had that kind of feel to it, sort of as well, too. That was pretty cool. But not too many movies when it comes to that, adding in that time period with the cannibalistic, and then, like I said, adding in that historical, like, the Donner Party and all that kind of stuff like that. So to me, like I said, I mean, even though yeah, it's not the greatest movie in the entire world, but to me, I've always found it to be a good movie. So for me, like I said, I probably will put it in that 7.0 range.
all right. No, for sure, man. So, and I'm definitely with you on that, Devil. That's ultimately how I look at the movie as well. Is a 7.0. I think it's proper. I like the execution. I like the I like the acting. And again, like I had precursored before, I like the fact that it went into categories and stuff that really hadn't been touched on when it came to that. So ultimately, this is kind of the way it breaks down. Between Dreamcatcher, we had a 7 and a 7.5 and a 7.225, and we've got a collective 7 for when it comes to Ravenous. So ultimately, that one does slide the needle into the vampire's favor when it came to this one. Um, but ultimately, what do you think when it just comes to Dreamcatcher as a whole? Do you like the idea of a 7.5 just for the divide, or do you think that 7 is proper when it comes to it with a slight nod to Dreamcatcher for that? Because that's something we kind of have to play with as well, because ultimately, story and execution I do find Dreamcatcher to be a more solid film with the direction that it goes with. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with a 7 when we're talking about stylistic movies for Stephen King. You're definitely right when it comes to that because it's got Misery, Pet Cemetery, Shining, so many epic movies that we would absolutely agree are on a much higher par. Um, so overall, what do you think, my friend? Because if we're going by simplistic scores, it gives the Vampires movie a win by an eyelash. Um, but just for the sake of the scores, how do you look at it? Do you think a 7 collectively for both movies with a nod is the way to go, or do you think there's some strength in Dreamcatcher for a full half point? I want to hear your take on it.
I mean, for me personally, like I said, I mean, if we're gonna go with it, I'm more of a cool of just because I'm cool with obviously Dreamcatcher getting the win,
Okay.
versus it. But I think both being a 7.0 and Dreamcatcher winning only because of the like I said, I agree with the movie as a whole. I think Dreamcatcher is gonna catch more people,
Sure.
pun not included, catch more people's attention and eye versus
Yeah.
Ravenous. Like you said, I mean, yeah, Stephen King, it's going to draw people. That Jeffrey Jones, it's going to push people away. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't really typically like, you know,
Like they're
historical
afraid to support
movies.
it.
Yeah, or even just like historical movies or war, like that Civil War-ish time films and stuff like that, Western sort of kind of feel to it. Maybe you don't like those and stuff like that. To me, I think that even though both movies flopped,
Yeah.
I think that ultimately Dreamcatcher's flop is probably a little bit more detrimental because even though Ravenous did have those big names, it didn't have the big huge names like Dreamcatcher had. Where I
And
think like that more having Morgan Freeman and some of those big actors and go like, yeah, just because you got big actors in movies doesn't do it. So that's why I kind of feel like
sure.
in that realm of it, that Dreamcatcher definitely flopped as far as that more than Ravenous did. I think in the realm of that because, like you said, with Ravenous, you weren't really. I mean, even though all those players and all those actors are all good actors, those are kind of movies that you would expect a lot of some of those actors to have done. Where
Yeah.
Dreamcatcher was this big epic Stephen King movie. And it's like you got Morgan Freeman, you got these guys, you got that guy and that guy, and you're kind of like Okay, yeah. But did they really need some of these big name actors in this movie? You know what I mean? Like Timothy,
Very
like I said,
valid.
not to say that Timothy Olyphant wasn't isn't is as big then as he is now, because he's definitely not. But he was still somewhat of an established actor. Did he need to be in that one of those roles or those ones? You could have just that role, those roles could have gone to definitely a lower one. Same with Morgan Freeman. His character could have went to fucking anybody. You know what I mean? Tom Sizemore is awesome, and he's from everything from big movies to low budget, so he can kind of go fit anywhere. But I kind of feel like yeah, with that, like I said, and with the fact that trying to bump up Dreamcatchers to that 7.5 is that you're still in that level where you're putting it up, still pushing the envelope of those other
Too,
Stephen King
too
movies,
close.
where at least to dropping it down to a 7, like I said, even though yeah, I mean, I know we're dropping both of them down to a 7. Ultimately Dreamcatcher would win because we don't do 2.25. So technically, Dreamcatcher would technically win at a 7.25. But since we're not doing 7 point, the points or whatever
Totally.
like that, then yeah, I'm cool. I'm cool with both of them being at that 7.0 plateau. I think both of them equally work well with each other against each other. But obviously, like I said, because a 7.5 and a 7.0 is better than a 7.0 and a 7.0, Dreamcatcher definitely gets the win.
No, no worries, Devil. And I'm cool with that. With that. So Fangs and Infernos, that's the way it's going to be. We're going to rank them both at a 7.0. We're going to give the little nod to Dreamcatcher for the idea of slightly stylistic success with Stephen King's name being attached and having that benefit versus the potentials. Now, don't get me or Devil wrong. We are not judge, jury, or executioner of anything. Our personal beliefs in an actor or actress and what happens outside of film has nothing to do with us. But we do also understand that different fans' opinions of a certain actor or actress's behaviors could possibly come into play. But the idea of a slightly more consistent storytelling of a Stephen King novel in Dreamcatcher is a little bit stronger than like a period piece based off like revolutionary times, where even as much as we like Ravenous, understanding that that's a very difficult movie for a studio to even place, that alone might have been very difficult for the success for Ravenous to be able to succeed, I should say, when it comes to that. But that's the way that we are going to give it. We are going to match them up equally at a 7.0, but we are going to give that edge to Dreamcatcher overall. So that's the way that it's going to be to finalize everything out and to draw a close to season two's showdowns between Vampire and Devil. The final one is going to go to Vampire on this one. Yours truly, when it comes to Dreamcatcher, slightly edging out Ravenous. But make sure that you guys pay attention and stay in tune with our socials as Devil puts together our final scores when it came to this season's showdowns of when it came to Vampire's victories versus Devil's victories. So stay tuned to all of our socials to see how that overall numbers come out. We really, really appreciate you guys when it came to this one. Always an absolute pleasure. Coming up very, very soon, we are closing out season 2 with our best of 2025. You guys voted on it. All of you beloved Fangs and Infernos chose your 5 movies that Devil and I will discuss. Check out both of our social media pages on both Facebook and Instagram to check out what was in play and what ultimately ended up as our final, our final choices based off of you guys. That was all about you guys. So we will see you guys very, very soon for a fresh episode where we get to discuss the top 5 movies voted on by you guys for 2025. But wrapping it all up on our final showdown of 2025 as Dreamcatcher for the Vampire nudges out Ravenous when it comes to Devil. But we'll see you guys very, very soon. And before we let you guys go officially, please make sure that you guys are supporting our beloveds in Mark and Lizzie with Rock and Horror Apparel. When it comes to merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, Mark and Lizzie are our official merch store when it comes to that rock and horror apparel. They handle our merch, and we really, really appreciate them. Take advantage of all of the sales that they're doing right now. We did have some Fangs and Infernos that did take advantage of their Black Friday sale. Shout out to our friend Lydia Manson, who took advantage of that sale. But we did also have some people who were very, very down for the cause when it came to getting some Vampire and Devil merch. And keep in mind that with us being involved in their web store, their deals also apply to us. So keep that in mind when it comes to when you guys want to do shopping, because as of the recording, you've got Christmas coming up, and make sure that you turn a Christmas into a Gothmas with everything from the Vampire and Devil merch store. Also, that being said, just like the devil, if you like hot things to keep your bones warm and your fires flaring, Brutalities is definitely the way to go for that. We absolutely love everything that they do. And please make sure that you're taking advantage of all the amazing tea that's involved with those guys. And of course, take a shout out to our beloved John Kozik, who owns the Witchboard Museum in Baltimore, as well as the Salem Witchboard Museum. Please make sure that you guys are getting out there and supporting small businesses, as well as, of course, going out and checking out these amazing, museums, historical stuff, coming off a conversation about historical times. So we always appreciate John Kozik and everything that he does. And of course, of our beloved friends at Twisted Vines, Saren and Chris, with all of the decor and all of the great stuff that they do. But we're going to leave it at that for now. And we will be back soon enough to talk all about 2025 as we wrap up the second season of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Be good, take care of each other. And as always, horns up, fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course, the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll. Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities. All right there, Fangs and Infernos, and all of our beloved RIPs. Let's talk a little bit about a brand new coffin nail, shall we? We're going to take it all the way back. And not as in all the way back to a particularly early movie, but we're going to go all the way back to early times in vampirism as we discuss Ambrosio, the first vampire. It's a more recent movie. It's very, very low budget. Here's the thing, though. I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would because one of the things about this movie that I found to be particularly interesting is the fact that it had this very cool hybrid of Ambrosio, the main title character who was, the first vampire, at least according to the ideas of this movie, mixed with Count Dracula, who was kind of like one of the main villains of this movie. mixed with old school Greek mythology. And that's what I actually really liked about this movie. So Ambrosio basically is a vampire who lived on, he's a 27-year-old vampire who basically lives everything on because of a deal he made with, with Hades in order to like live longer. However, he became kind of like a rebel and kind of a thorn in Hades' side. He ends up being able to walk out in the sunlight because he stole Apollo's ring, the god of war, and this ring allowed him to be immune to certain deficiencies, so he's able to walk out in the ring in the sun. And he ends up coming across like a love interest in Sarah, who's basically in an abusive relationship, and they connect and combine, and she becomes the main love interest, while Count Dracula and Hades start plotting their revenge on Ambrosio, which ultimately turns into a self-sacrifice situation as he makes a deal with Apollo in order to be able to turn the tails on Dracula and Hades, bring his love back to life as she had been taken from him, and allow her to be able to live on. And there might be a little bit of, offspring birth as well. But overall, look, I like this movie just fine. I'm really not going to downplay it too hard because of the lack of real money behind it. It did have a very, very low budget. But I enjoyed it overall for what it was worth. I'm going to give it a 6.5 in a coffin nails for Ambrosio, the first vampire. Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And we love it. We love the fact that, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities Shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.